Glad to have you back. The outbreak of COVID-19 pandemic, amongst other factors, caused the Nigerian economy to slip into its worst recession last year, the second in 5 years after 2 consecutive quarters of contraction. When growth contracted by 3.62% in quarter 3 and grew by minus 6.10% in quarter 2, despite projections and reprojections, the Nigerian economy demonstrated its ruggedness by the positive outcome in quarter 4 of 2020. Coming out stronger, particularly against economic predictions. According to the National Bureau of Statistics, Nigeria's GDP grew by 0.11% year-on-year in real terms in the fourth quarter of 2020, representing the first positive quarterly growth in the last 3 quarters, leading to an exit from recession. The positive growth recorded in quarter 4, according to the NBS, is a reflection of a gradual return of economic activities following the easing of restrictions of movement and limited local and international commercial activities in the preceding quarters. With this surprise rebound, Africa's largest economy may recover faster than expected as the oil price and output increase this year is also on the high side. Joining me live to give more insight to Nigeria's economic recovery process, he is the Director General of Franco-Nigeria Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Mr. Moses Umoru. Thank you very much for your time, Mr. Umoru. Thank you for coming to our studio.
It's great to be here.
Yes, first, this figures, how did it come to you? Was it a surprise? Were you expecting it 0.11%? We were expecting first quarter according to the minister and the CBN governor. Yes. But one way or the other, the last quarter of 2020 did the magic.
Yes, of course. It came as a surprise because, of course, if you look at the predictions from the IFC, the World Bank, and all of that, I expected Nigeria should also experience another negative quarter of growth, of GDP growth, right? This has shown us, Tolu, is the fact that there is resilience in the Nigerian economy. The ability for the Nigerian economy to recover, it cannot be argued with, basically. I mentioned before on this show that if you look at developing economies in the world, 89% are in the informal sector. Yeah. What happens in the informal sector is the chance for V-shaped kind of recovery. Why? Because once you lock down that kind of an economy, it goes into recession. Once you reopen the economy, automatically it's like you just on a tap and then you off a tap again. There is room for recovery. It shows, number one, the resilience in the economy of Nigeria. But it goes way beyond that, Tolu. The fact that the Nigerian economy experienced 0.11% growth in the fourth quarter of 2020 doesn't necessarily mean that the Nigerians have actually recovered from recession.
True.
Population growth is growing at 2.6%. What that shows us is that there is negative per capita GDP already of around 4.58%. So population growth is growing higher than the goods and services that are flowing into the economy. So the government has to do a lot of work as far as ensuring that there is fiscal stimulus in the economy is concerned, like what the lady has also mentioned before. And of course, the economy comes to recovery as soon as possible. Let's look at some facts about this result. Agricultural sector about 3.4%, and the financial sector around above 3%. Oil and gas contracted by around 8.6%. And of course, if you look at the aviation sector, let's talk about it a bit. It contracted by 36%.
Obviously, that
so
was
if you look at, if we're going to experience a proper recovery, we need to build back better. And when we are building back better, it has to be all-inclusive. Every sector has to be built upon. There are sectors that can recover by themselves. The aviation sector might not be able to do that. That is where the issue of fiscal stimulus has to go into relevant sectors of the Nigerian economy to bring about the necessary growth.
I thought it was the 5 billion naira. That's not like, because I don't know what that can actually do when you talk about the aviation sector. 4 billion for the aviation, for the airlines, and 1 billion naira, I think, for support services around the airport area. What sense do you make of that?
That is a drop in a large ocean.
Honestly.
It cannot take the sector where it's supposed to be. There has to be proper fiscal stimulus in that sector, over in hundreds of billions.
Do we have that capacity? That's a talk for another day. But really, let's look at all of the issues that we went through before the recession, coming out of recession. One is the Ash-End-SARS protest, which later was hijacked by hoodlums and all of that. The oil price volatility, which also obviously came from the lockdowns and all of that. Then also trade disruptions. There was a lot of disruptions, movement of goods and services from China, from other countries to the country, and of course the lockdown that we talked about. How lucky? Let's look at all of these issues. Nigeria seems to be so lucky.
Yes, I mentioned resilience of the Nigerian economy. Yeah. And one aspect that has been looked away as far as the Nigerian economy is concerned is the informal sector. The informal sector has the capacity to reopen any developing economy at any touch point in time. So if we are going to maintain our recovery, we need to focus on the informal sector. And I will come back to that later. Now, we talked about the socio-political issues in the economy that affected the economy. Of course, it did affect the economy in 2020. We had the NSAS, we had farmer headers crisis, of course, that affected food supply from the north down. Even, of course, it's still on and the rest of them. And irrespective of all of this, the Nigerian economy is recovering. I will not call that a recovery because of our negative per capita GDP. It's recovering. It shows resilience.
It is recovering, truly.
It shows resilience. And when you see resilience in recovery in an economy, what the government should do is to focus on infrastructure growth. It's very, very important. Now, if you look at, like you already mentioned from the first speaker, we talk about the Economic Recovery and Sustainability Plan that was set up in 2020, where the government talked about the possibility of, investing in infrastructure, getting revenue from non-oil and the oil sector, helping, a lot of households with solar panels and the rest of them. And of course, more importantly, the government is looking at, creating fiscal stimulus for relevant sectors of the Nigerian economy. But the thing about it is this: it's high time we need to cut back a bit. This octopus approach towards goal achievement will not necessarily work. Let's have a single policy. Nigerians are resilient. This result has shown that already, right? Focus only on infrastructure. If you focus on infrastructure, forget about the national agricultural development, where we're talking about 200 acres of land for each state. Yeah, that's good enough, but focus on agriculture. Private sectors are going to go into farm by themselves. You don't have to do that, government, no. Focus on infrastructure growth, focus on power and access roads. You discover that enterprise will kick off by themselves. So the government should focus on one thing at a time, get that over with, and then go to the next. I think that's what's going to help our recovery and make sure it's sustainable.
Now, the oil sector plunged one way or the other in this figures that we have, 19.76%, that's year on year. And then in real terms, against the contraction of 13.87 recorded in Q3. Now, what would you say is responsible for this? Some are saying it's because of the OPEC quota and the reduction in the price, in the number of the barrels per day, production capacity. Thank God there's been no issues in the Niger Delta. We've been able to sustain production. Now, looking at the oil and non-oil sector, how diversified is our economy, in its totality? I
was going to mention that if you look at, first of all, I'll answer the first question. Okay. Like you mentioned already, the quarter before the fourth quarter 2020, the supply was 2 million barrels per day. It cut down to 1.56 million barrels per day, right? True. So definitely the OPEC quota has come into play, and definitely we have to cut back on that. Of course, it's going to affect output in that context. And now I'm talking about the diversification of the economy. The Nigerian economy is already diversified. If you look at oil sector contribution to GDP, 5.87%. Non-oil sector, 94.13%. It shows already by default the economy is already diversified. What is not diversified is government revenue. But it is important because government are the biggest spenders in any economy. So if you're going to create fiscal stimulus, government must earn more because they will spend big. And it will cut, like we have the circular flow of income, definitely. The government puts funds, becomes an injection into the circular flow of income. It goes into, businesses and the rest of them, right? So I think what we need to do is to ensure, for example, agriculture, 26% contribution to GDP. That's huge. But 80% of agriculture is from food production alone, no value creation. That is where infrastructure gap comes in. We must ensure that there is value creation from agricultural produce so that this value creation will bring about foreign exchange earnings that would still further boost the economy the way the oil is boosting the economy, right? We cannot relax on oil alone. I've mentioned that before so many times on many platforms, right? Because it is exogenously determined. It is not within our control.
It's not within.
Global
we can't
oil
predict.
price, one, there is a shock tomorrow. It's as good as just going back to where we're coming from, even worse than where we're coming from and all of that. So let's focus on what we can control internally. And it's very, very important for us.
Adding value is really key at this time. What about these interventions? There's no how we'll talk about this and not talk about interventions. We've seen stimulus packages even from other countries. We've seen in China, we've seen in the United States. President Joe Biden is after a $1.9 trillion US stimulus package now that he wants to give Americans. Now, look at what we have in Nigeria and the assessment now from the presidency saying that yes, the impact is already being felt. We've seen the survival scheme thing, paying salaries, the payroll thing. How would you assess all of these interventions and the impact on the masses? I have an argument. I'm always talking about there's supposed to be a transition period before we really start to feel all of these interventions.
The question is, who does the intervention get to? I think that's the fundamental question. Are they getting to the people we need these interventions to get to? And I do not think so, because number one, we have data deficit already. Right, you're talking about fiscal stimulus, talking about palliatives and all of that that goes into the economy. You do not know who these monies are going to meet at the end of the day. So that is why you see that there is a little bit of dissonance between the fiscal policy and the monetary policy in the economy. Why? Because the monetary policy believes that, yes, there's a lot of fiscal intervention. And when there is so much fiscal intervention, there is a lot of money in circulation, right? And then there's possibility of inflation. But the Monetary Policy Committee definitely will have to keep their rates at 11 point, just a bit above 11%, thinking that, yes, there's a lot of fiscal intervention. So there is a dissonance. Why? Because the effect of the fiscal intervention is not being felt at the end of the day. Why? Because of lack of data. Like I mentioned that the coronavirus gave us a very huge opportunity that we actually did not take in this economy, right? If you're going to give people fiscal stimulus, you must ask them, come with your data, let's extract the data for us to give you those fiscal stimulus. But we did not do that at the end of the day. So the question is, where does the money go to? I do not know. We don't see the impact it's making.
This is supposed to be a very busy year too, if we look at, considering the fact that we have the AFCFTA on one side, yes, where Nigerians have been talking about implementation. Yesterday, I had the Secretary of the National Action Committee, who's also the SSA to the President, yes, Mr. Francis Anatogu. He was on the show and he spoke extensively about how far they've gone and all of that. You are involved in, of course, commerce and all of that between Nigeria and French companies and all of that. Take us through what you see, what you make of the AFCFTA, and what's the impact, because that's also something that should impact positively on our economy, and it's definitely trickle down to all of these figures that we see.
Yes, we have already talked about the AFCFTA with even top government functionaries and the rest of them over time. And one thing we have discovered is this, that the AFCFTA, of course, is supposed to boost intra-African trade, if well implemented, of course, subject to well implementation, around 52–53%, right? Currently, is around, United Nations has it at around 16% or thereabout, but not taking into cognizance the informal economy, though. But of course, if you look at for Nigeria, what benefit does it bring to Nigeria? At the end of the day, we don't have the competitive advantage because of our infrastructure gap.
It's a problem.
But in the area of service provision, Nigeria is on course, right? Telecommunications, IT, we have young startups that are into IT these days that can export these softwares and the rest of them to other African countries where they don't have the same capacity. It is here. So we need to, first of all, what we need to do is to focus on our competitive advantage and ensure that we leverage on that to be able to benefit the most from the AFCFTA. Alongside, as that we are benefiting from there, the government is working on infrastructure. Because once we get infrastructure, we're creating value from our agricultural produce and the rest of them. Of course, we can export to other African countries. But for now, we remain the market, but we can export our services. That's where we are.
And we have that population, and everyone believes that no country should take advantage of 200 million people.
It's a lot.
It's a lot when you talk about
and a young population, for that matter.
Young, vibrant population.
Exactly.
Growth in the sector again was driven by information and communications.
Yes.
Telecommunications, broadcasting. I'm happy. We are. So others are agriculture, real estate, manufacturing, mining, quarrying, and construction. So a lot away from all of the regular oil things. So let's stay with information technology, telecommunications. Why do you think that this sector did so very well this time around? Is it because everyone moved away from everyone moved online to start attending meetings and all of that?
It's easy to tell. You've said that already, definitely. Data consumption from communication, Zoom, Microsoft WebEx, and the rest of them definitely increased. Of course, which was huge benefits for that sector. So I think that is where the growth for that sector is coming from. It's clear. We don't even need to explain the technicalities around it. That is where the growth came from.
The positive growth is another thing that many believe that the country needs to capitalize on, to be able to, for subsequent quarters, so that we could get good figures from other quarters. So what do you think? Do we have quick wins at the moment for us to be able to, stabilize our economy? Because like you've also identified, these figures that we have outperformed what we had from the IMF, from the World Bank. So what more can we do to stabilize our economy?
Anyways, I always, for the first time in a very long time, I always approach to congratulate the federal government on the enactment of the Finance Act 2020. The Finance Act 2020 came on board in the beginning of January. Definitely, we are going to see the effect of the Finance Act maybe from the first quarter results for 2021, where a lot of stimulus packages were done. The SME sectors were supported. The VAT was reduced to a reasonable extent. The Income Tax Act from 0.5 to 0.25%. So the government is supporting businesses right now with the Finance Act. And I believe that the Finance Act would be a real stimulus for the economy. I think that's one of the best legislative laws that has been out in the country since the Economic Recovery and Growth Plan. We don't know how much that was implemented though, but this is a very, very good piece of legislation that has come on board, and I think is going to stimulate the economy going forward. Right?
I think that the MPC also has a lot in their hands, because if you look at all of these figures coming in, I have been reading about this, and I see that they are going to be fighting with growth on one side, price control on one side, liquidity in the system at one side. This is not the best time to be governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria. What do you think they will be, or do you think will be the thrust at the next meeting, the next MPC meeting? What would they be sitting around that table? What would they be considering? What are the big things you think they will be considering at this time?
I think they have to bring the fiscal policy administrators in the same room also, and let the fiscal policy administrators tell us how far the fiscal stimulus in the economy has gone. Because there's a lot of assumption around a lot of stimulus here and there. If we increase the monetary policy rate, it's going to skyrocket inflation, which is already around 6.47%. What is contributing to inflation is not the fiscal stimulus, it's not the monies that are circulating the economy. It's the high cost of food prices, it's the high cost of electricity, it's the fuel price that is definitely going to increase once again, and the rest of them. It's not fiscal stimulus that is causing that increase in that aspect. So they have to bring fiscal policy practitioners into the room to ensure that there is a match. Right now, there's a mismatch. And I was actually surprised after the last MPC meeting that they maintained rate at status quo. Yeah. It's surprising. When inflation was around 15 point there, and then you are keeping MPR at around 11.5%, giving us almost a negative return for any investment within the economy and the rest of them. No, they have to push that rate up a bit, right? People need to begin to earn even from their savings, at least as a survival tactics going forward, and that's how I believe that's going to work.
As a chamber, I know that there will also be issues. I've spoken to, I know your DGs like you know yourselves. I've spoken to the likes of Muda Yusuf. I've spoken to many of them, and they talk about what members are going through, particularly with regards to businesses at this time. I know the lockdown and all of that must have also affected business one way or the other with some of your members. Can you take us through what they're going through, what's being done at this time? Are they gradually picking up, things returning to normal as expected?
Yeah, first of all, as the economy has resilience, so the members of the France-Nigerian Chamber of Commerce have a lot of resilience too.
That's a good one.
Right. I must say that brands like Schneider, CFAO, and Total even embarked on CSR projects even during the lockdown, just to show that they have to do so well, Sanofi and the rest of them, and all of that, which is very, very good. As it affects all sectors, it also affects the EU businesses here in Nigeria, definitely. The lockdown affected everybody. But of course, there is also the reopening once again. And even from the chamber side, what we're doing right now is this, because we are advocating for the government to take the informal economy and make it a bit formal, semi-formal in quotes. So what we're doing right now is, as last year, we opened up a free membership for startups. And the criteria was that you have to register your company, you have to file your tax returns every year. So we are dragging those young startups from the informal economy by default to the formal economy with the incentives we are giving to them, trainings and the rest of them, grants and support system we are giving to them from bigger brands and all of that. So it's taking them. If other members of the organized private sector can do the same thing, we're going to do a lot. Before even the government comes on board, we have taken so much from the informal economy and we have put them in the formal economy because of their incentives. So if we're going to really drive growth, right, there has to be an incentive for growth. The reason why most people don't pay taxes these days is because there's a trust gap between the taxpayers and, of course, the government, right? Put incentives down. Let them see that, yes, you are putting something for them, and the reason why they have to come on board, and they're going to come on board. So a lot of these brands, for example, Danone now is in partnership with Ogun State government for vertical integration for dairy production. They've collected a lot of acres of land in Ogun State for training for young farmers. They're going to go into dairy production and the rest of them. They want to ensure that those milk is being produced here in the country. And it's huge. So French companies are not running away. They are doing a lot. They are spending money here, and they are very resilient.
Indeed, need to spend money. Africa's most populous nation. Let's wrap up with issues around forex. I know your members also deal with forex, and you also know what's been happening with forex. The minister was saying yesterday that there is an urgent need to bridge this gap. Talking about that disparity, it's almost 100 naira between the I think the bank the rates are the when you go go to the banks and at the parallel markets.
Yes.
Two different things. We've been running this for some time. I don't even think we just have two rates. We have more than two rates. We have rates for importation of PMS. We have rates for pilgrimage. This is a country that just has different kind of rates. How do you see us harmonizing all of this and addressing this disparity? It's been on for some time.
Yeah.
The negative impact on businesses and investors' confidence, we cannot overemphasize this.
There are two issues. Number one, the multiple rates in the economy, and number two, the repatriation of funds for foreign exchange earnings is made in the economy for French companies. They are really complaining about that. It's the ease of repatriation. It's a big deal. And I think the Central Bank of Nigeria will have to do a lot about that. Now we have excess crude oil accounts. There's confidence, $40 per barrel that was placed as the benchmark. Now we're earning extra from there and all of that. We can do a lot from there. And when it comes to marrying of rates, it's important that we have to come together and do that. There's no need for NIFEX rates. There's no need for, airline rates and the rest of them. Let's put the rates together and then, of course, create a margin around +3 minus 3% and all of that. And then we can have those things, running instead of some businesses benefiting from low rates while others are benefiting from getting higher rates through the black market and the rest of them. I think that's the responsibility of the central bank. And I think at the next MPC, they have to come together and then marry these rates together. It's going to help. It creates what we call uniformity and creates a lot of certainty. Once we know this is what it is, we can be able to factor the risk instead of saying we might get the rate from there, factor a different risk. We might get the rate from there, factor a different risk. No, let it be one and let everybody understand what is going on as far as the economy is concerned.
For French companies, again, back to French companies, do they have sector specific? Do they have sectors they are really focusing on at the moment? Maybe even trying to support government in diversification. Are they just open to all of our sectors?
They're open to all sectors. So we have, of course, we started a lot with the oil and gas sector, Total. Like I will mention that 10% of their global revenue is from Nigeria, in case you don't know. And now we have those in the agricultural sector. We have Danone. We even have those in the e-commerce sector, Kui, that just came into Nigeria not long ago and all of that. So it's not a single sector. Wow. It's all sectors that are coming in and all of that, and which is very, very beautiful. Even the real estate sector, we have Beirut properties, for example. It is beautiful, and they're coming into different sectors of the economy. And it's not just foreign portfolio investment, foreign direct investment, building infrastructures, employing people, and of course, embarking on CSR projects.
Aside making it look, I know it looks very good, but there are some challenges, I'm sure, they will be facing. Ease of doing business initiative of government. How easy is it really for them to do business? Let's wrap up on that note.
They're happy now with the Finance Act. Let's see how this Finance Act will be implemented going forward. The FRS, we're having a discussion with them 2 days from now and see how we can be able to ensure how do we tackle companies that are not domiciled in Nigeria here. These are things we want to discuss and see. The act on paper is beautiful. The implementation is another thing. That's why we expect that if this act is implemented to the letter, there are a lot of things that will make easy right now.
It's really nice having you on the show again. It's been a while. I've been speaking to Director General Franco Nigeria Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Mr. Moses Umaru, breaking it down, the issues around GDP, around the economy, and of course, relations between French companies and Nigeria, which is also key at this time where we need investors to come into the country. I appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much. Let's